The sprinkler system hissed to life at 3 a.m., and Karen's pristine pool transformed into a glowing neon nightmare. As she stumbled out in her robe, screaming about property damage, Maya stood at her window with an empty gallon jug and a smile. That could cut glass. 3 months of stolen water, dead roses, and legal threats had led to this moment. But Karen had no idea this was just the beginning, because when you mess with a biochemist's garden, you don't just get revenge. You get a masterclass in molecular justice that will leave the entire neighborhood questioning everything they thought they knew about the sweet woman next door. Maya Chen pressed her face against the cool glass of her kitchen window, watching the last of her prize-winning roses wither in the scorching August heat. The delicate petals, once a vibrant coral pink, had turned brown and brittle, dropping like tears onto the parched earth below. She'd spent 3 years cultivating that garden, nursing each plant with the precision of the biochemist she was, creating a small paradise in her backyard that had become the envy of Willowbrook Drive. Now it was dying. The irony wasn't lost on her that she could synthesize complex compounds in her lab at the university, manipulate molecules with surgical precision, but she couldn't save her garden from a simple lack of water. Well, it wasn't simple at all. It was Karen. Karen Whitmore lived in the house directly behind Maya's, separated only by a chain-link fence that had become the epicenter of their escalating war. At 45, Karen possessed the kind of aggressive entitlement that made HOA presidents weep with joy and neighbors consider relocating to different states. Her blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her nails always immaculate, and her sense of righteousness always insufferable. The trouble had started 3 months ago when Maya noticed her water bill had doubled seemingly overnight. As a single woman living alone in a modest 2-bedroom house, she'd always been conservative with water usage. The spike made no sense until she discovered the source. Maya had been working late in her home office one evening when she heard the distinct sound of water running. She'd checked every faucet, every toilet, every appliance. Nothing. The sound was coming from outside. Following the noise to her backyard, she'd made a discovery that left her speechless. There, snaking under her fence and connected directly to her outdoor spigot, was a garden hose. Karen's garden hose. The confrontation that followed had been Maya's first real glimpse into her neighbor's particular brand of crazy. "Oh, that," Karen had said, barely looking up from where she was adjusting the pH levels in her massive in-ground pool. "I'm just borrowing a little water. My bill was getting ridiculous." Maya had stared at her, certain she'd misheard. "You're stealing my water." Stealing is such an ugly word. Karen had straightened, fixing Maya with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I prefer to think of it as community sharing. We are neighbors, after all." Community sharing. Maya's voice had climbed an octave. "You've been stealing my water for months." "I've been using resources that would otherwise go to waste," Karen had corrected primly. "You barely water your little flower patch anyway. I have a pool to maintain and a proper garden to keep up. Surely you can see the logic in that." The sheer audacity had left Maya momentarily speechless. In that silence, Karen had continued. "Besides, what are you going to do about it? Call the police. They'll laugh you right off the phone. It's just water. Just water." Maya had disconnected the hose that night, but Karen had simply reconnected it the next day. When Maya had installed a lock on her spigot, Karen had called the city, claiming Maya was violating some obscure ordinance about water access. When that failed, she'd begun her letter-writing campaign. Every week for the past 2 months, Maya had received increasingly aggressive letters from Karen, typed on official-looking letterhead from Whitmore Legal Consulting, which Maya had later discovered was just Karen's dining room table and a computer. The letters cited everything from property easement laws to environmental regulations, each one more creative in its interpretation of municipal code than the last. The final letter had arrived that morning, and it had been the last straw. "Dear Ms. Chen, this is to notify you that continued refusal to allow reasonable access to municipal water resources constitutes a violation of community standards and neighborly cooperation. As water is a shared resource essential to property maintenance and community aesthetics, your selfish hoarding of this common utility has forced me to seek alternative solutions. Be advised that I have documented your wasteful water practices. including your excessive plant watering and lengthy showers, and will be filing a complaint with the appropriate authorities regarding your environmental irresponsibility. Additionally, I have consulted with legal counsel regarding the property line dispute that has contributed to this conflict. My survey indicates that your fence may be encroaching on my property by as much as 6 inches, which would technically make your water spigot community property. I trust you will reconsider your unreasonable position before this matter escalates. Further, sincerely, Karen Whitmore. Whitmore Legal Consulting. Maya had read the letter 3 times, each reading increasing her blood pressure exponentially. The woman was now claiming that Maya's water spigot was on Karen's property based on a survey that Maya was certain existed only in Karen's imagination. The threat about legal counsel was equally fictitious. Maya had done her research and discovered that Karen worked part-time at a dental office and had never attended law school, but the threat was enough to push Maya over the edge. She'd been teetering on for months, standing in her kitchen now, watching her garden die while she could hear the sound of Karen's pool filter humming contentedly next door. Maya felt something crystallize inside her chest. It was cold and sharp and completely unlike the patient, methodical person she'd always considered herself to be. She walked to her home office and pulled out her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she researched municipal water codes, property laws, and most importantly the chemical composition of various pool maintenance products. As a biochemist, she understood the delicate balance required to maintain a swimming pool's ecosystem. She also understood exactly how to disrupt that balance in ways that would be spectacular, temporary, and completely untraceable. But first, she needed to document everything. Maya spent the next hour photographing Karen's hose connection, printing out copies of all the threatening letters, and researching Karen's background. What she discovered was both enlightening and infuriating. Karen had pulled similar stunts with 2 previous neighbors who had both eventually sold their homes and moved away rather than deal with her escalating harassment. The woman was a serial property bully who had learned that most people would eventually cave rather than fight. She targeted single women, elderly residents, and young couples, anyone she perceived as vulnerable or unlikely to stand up to her aggressive tactics. Maya wasn't most people. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that her dying roses would never see, Maya made her decision. Karen wanted to play games with community property and legal threats. Fine. But she was about to discover that PhD in biochemistry came with certain practical applications. Maya spent the evening carefully mixing her solution. The compound was elegant in its simplicity, a combination of fluorescein dye and a pH buffer that would remain stable for approximately 72 hours. Before harmlessly breaking down. The dye was the same substance used in medical diagnostics, completely non-toxic to humans and animals, but capable of turning large volumes of water a brilliant, glowing neon green. The timing mechanism was equally simple. Maya had learned to work with Karen's schedule over the months of conflict. Every night at exactly 2:45 a.m., Karen's automatic pool cleaning system activated. The woman was obsessive about pool maintenance, running the system on a precise schedule that ensured perfect filtration. Maya had also observed that Karen's pool was fed by the same main water line that supplied her own house, the common setup in their older neighborhood. More importantly, the pool's intake valve was accessible from Karen's backyard, which connected to a small drainage easement that ran behind both properties. At 2:30 a.m., Maya slipped out of her house dressed in dark clothing, carrying a small backpack containing her carefully prepared solution. The night was still and quiet, the kind of suburban silence that made every footstep sound like a thunderclap. She made her way through the drainage easement, a narrow strip of land that technically belonged to the city, until she reached the point where she could access Karen's pool equipment. The intake valve was exactly where she'd observed it during her reconnaissance. Maya quickly connected a small siphon system she'd constructed, allowing her solution to be drawn directly into the pool's circulation system. When the cleaning cycle began, she was back in her house by 2:40, just in time to hear the familiar hum of Karen's pool system coming to life. Maya positioned herself at her kitchen window and waited. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The pool remained its normal crystal blue, reflecting the security lights that illuminated Karen's backyard. Maya began to wonder if she'd miscalculated the concentration or the timing. Then she saw it. Part 2, Chemical WARFARE. The knock on Maya's door came at exactly 7:30 a.m., 3 days after Karen's pool had been transformed into a glowing green spectacle. Maya had been expecting it, had even practiced her surprised expression in the bathroom. Mirror. She opened the door to find 2 police officers on her doorstep, their faces wearing the weary expressions of people who had already been dealing with Karen Whitmore for far too long. Dr. Chen. The taller officer, whose nameplate read Martinez, looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I'm Officer Martinez, this is Officer Kim. We are here about a complaint filed by your neighbor, Karen Whitmore. Maya blinked, channeling every acting class she'd taken in college. A complaint? What kind of complaint? She's alleging that you vandalized her swimming pool. Officer Kim consulted his notebook, clearly reading from it. She claims you, quote, used your scientific knowledge to poison her pool with radioactive chemicals as revenge for a minor neighborly disagreement. Maya couldn't help herself. Radioactive chemicals? Officer Martinez suppressed what looked suspiciously like a smile. That's what she said. She also mentioned something about you being a mad scientist who has access to dangerous laboratory equipment. I'm a biochemist at the university, Maya said carefully. I study enzyme interactions in metabolic pathways. Nothing remotely radioactive or dangerous. Right. Officer Kim flipped his notebook closed. Look, Dr. Chen, we're required to follow up on these complaints, but between you and me, we've dealt with Ms. Whitmore before. She's got a history of creative interpretations of neighborly disputes. What exactly is she claiming I did? She says you somehow introduced chemicals into her pool's filtration system that turned the water green and forced her to spend $3,000 on repairs. Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably. She also claims this was retaliation for what she calls reasonable water sharing. Maya felt a flicker of genuine anger. Water sharing? She's been stealing water directly from my spigot for months. I have documentation. The officers exchanged a look. She mentioned there was a dispute about water usage, Officer Kim said. But property line water disputes are civil matters, not criminal ones. And tampering with someone's pool would be criminal. Maya asked innocently. If it could be proven, yes. But Officer Martinez hesitated. The pool company tested the water. Whatever turned it green had completely dissipated by the time they got there. No trace of any foreign chemicals. Maya nodded thoughtfully as if this information was surprising to her. That's strange. I mean, if someone had actually done something to the pool, wouldn't there be evidence? That's what we thought too. Officer Kim tucked his notebook away. Ms. Whitmore seems to think you have access to some kind of disappearing chemicals. Disappearing chemicals, Maya repeated slowly. That sounds like something out of a movie. Yeah. That's what we told her. Officer Martinez looked relieved to be wrapping up the conversation. Look, we had to follow up, but there's no evidence of any crime here. Just to try to work things out with your neighbor, okay? Maybe through mediation. Or something. Maya watched them walk back to their patrol car, noting that they seemed to be chuckling about something. She waved pleasantly and closed the door, leaning against it with a smile of satisfaction, round one to Maya, but her satisfaction was short-lived. An hour later, she discovered what Karen's real retaliation looked like. Maya was working in her home office when she heard the sound of machinery outside. Concerned, she looked out her window and felt her stomach drop. A city truck was parked in front of her house, and 2 workers in municipal uniforms were standing in her front yard examining her sprinkler system. She rushed outside to find the workers in the process of disconnecting her irrigation lines. Excuse me, she called out, jogging toward them. What's going on here? The older of the 2 workers, a weathered man with kind eyes, looked up from his clipboard with obvious discomfort. We are here about a complaint filed regarding excessive water usage and potential violations of municipal conservation ordinances. Maya felt ice form in her stomach. What kind of complaint? Says here you've been running your sprinkler system outside of approved hours, using excessive amounts of water during drought restrictions, and possibly tampering with municipal water monitoring equipment. He consulted his clipboard again. We are required to disconnect your irrigation system pending an investigation. But I haven't been doing any of those things. Maya protested. I only water my garden twice a week, and only during approved hours. I have the programming schedule to prove it. The worker's expression softened. Look, lady, I'm just following orders here. The complaint came with photos and documentation. Says you've been running your system at all hours, flooding your yard, and wasting hundreds of gallons of water daily. Photos? Maya's voice was strangled. What photos? The worker hesitated, then showed her the complaint form. Clipped to it were several photographs that made Maya's blood run cold. The pictures showed her backyard sprinklers running at what appeared to be full blast, water pooling in large puddles across her lawn. The timestamp on the photos showed various times throughout the day and night when Maya's system should have been off, but Maya knew those photos weren't of her sprinklers. The angle was wrong, the water pressure was too high, and most tellingly, she could see the edge of Karen's yard in one of the shots. Karen had somehow manipulated the photos to make it look like Maya was running her sprinklers constantly. These aren't even my sprinklers, Maya said desperately. Look, you can check my system. It's programmed to run only on Tuesdays and Fridays, from 6 to 7 a.m. I can show you the controller. That's part of the investigation, the worker said apologetically. But for now, we have to shut off your water access to the irrigation system. Maya watched in horror as the men systematically disconnected every line that fed her garden. Within 20 minutes, her carefully cultivated paradise was cut off from any water source except what she could provide by hand with a garden hose. As the city truck drove away, Maya stood in her backyard staring at her roses, which were already showing signs of severe stress from the heat wave that had been gripping the region. Without the automated irrigation system, keeping them alive would require her to hand water for hours every day. Karen had played her hand brilliantly. She'd filed a false complaint with enough fabricated evidence to force the city to take action. Knowing that Maya would have to spend weeks fighting the bureaucracy to get her irrigation restored. In the meantime, her garden would die. Maya was still standing there, calculating how many gallons of water she'd need to haul by hand, when she heard the sound that made her blood boil, the unmistakable hiss of sprinklers. Karen's sprinklers. Maya marched to the fence line and peered through the chain links. Karen's elaborate irrigation system was running at full capacity, sending arcs of water across her perfectly manicured lawn and extensive flower beds. The woman had at least 8 different zones running simultaneously, using what had to be hundreds of gallons of water, and there was Karen herself, standing in her kitchen window with a coffee mug. Watching Maya's reaction with a smile of pure malicious satisfaction, their eyes met through the window, and Karen raised her mug in a mock toast before disappearing from view. Maya stood there for a long moment, absorbing the full scope of Karen's strategy. The woman had escalated their conflict to an entirely new level, using false documentation and municipal bureaucracy as weapons. She turned Maya's own expertise against her by making her look like some kind of mad scientist, then used the legal system to destroy Maya's garden while continuing to flaunt her own excessive water usage. But Karen had made a critical error. She'd assumed that Maya would be intimidated by legal threats and bureaucratic harassment. She'd assumed that a quiet academic would retreat in the face of such aggressive tactics. Karen clearly didn't understand who she was dealing with. Maya walked back into her house and opened her laptop. If Karen wanted to play with false documentation and fabricated evidence, Maya was happy to oblige. But unlike Karen's amateur hour approach, Maya's retaliation would be precise, elegant, and absolutely devastating. She started with research. Over the next 4 hours, Maya compiled a comprehensive dossier on Karen's water usage, property modifications, and legal complaints. What she discovered was a pattern of escalating harassment that went back years. Karen had filed 17 different complaints with various city departments over the past 3 years. She'd accused neighbors of everything from noise violations to zoning infractions to environmental hazards. In every case, the complaints had been filed after some kind of dispute with the neighbor in question. And in every case, the neighbor had eventually either given in to Karen's demands or sold their house and moved away. But more importantly, Maya discovered that Karen's property modifications were extensive and largely unpermitted. The woman had installed her pool, built a decorative retaining wall, and expanded her patio without pulling a single permit. She'd also modified her home's electrical system to support outdoor lighting and pool equipment without city approval. Maya smiled as she compiled her evidence. Karen wanted to play with municipal complaints. Game on. Maya spent the rest of the day photographing Karen's unpermitted modification. She stumbled to her kitchen window, still groggy from sleep, and felt her stomach plummet. 3 fire trucks, 2 police cars, and an ambulance were parked outside Karen's house. Emergency personnel in hazmat suits were setting up a perimeter around Karen's front yard, while neighbors gathered at a safe distance, pointing and whispering. Maya's carefully orchestrated herbicide message had worked exactly as planned. Spelled out across Karen's pristine lawn in dead, brown grass were the words, "Water thief," in letters 6 feet tall. But something had gone catastrophically wrong. Karen stood in her driveway wearing a silk robe and a cervical collar, gesticulating wildly at a paramedic while pointing directly at Maya's house. Even from a distance, Maya could see that Karen's eyes were red and swollen, her face blotchy with what looked like an allergic reaction. Maya's phone rang, the display showing her department head's number. "Maya?" Dr. Richardson's voice was tight with concern. "I need you to come in immediately. There's been an incident involving one of our faculty members and potential misuse of university resources." Maya's blood turned to ice. "What kind of incident?" "The kind that involves hazmat teams and potential criminal charges." "How soon can you be here?" Maya threw on clothes with shaking hands, her mind racing through the possibilities. The herbicide she'd used was commercially available and completely legal. There was no way it could have caused the kind of reaction that would require hazmat teams. Unless Karen had done something to herself to make it look worse than it was. Maya arrived at the university to find her laboratory sealed with yellow tape and 2 security guards posted outside. Dr. Richardson was waiting in the hallway, his expression grim. "Maya, I need you to tell me exactly what happened between you and your neighbor. I don't understand. What does my neighbor have to do with the university?" Dr. Richardson handed her a tablet displaying a news article from the local morning show. The headline made Maya's knees weak: "University biochemist accused of chemical attack on neighbor." The article was accompanied by a photo of Karen being loaded into an ambulance, her face covered with what appeared to be severe chemical burns. The caption read, "Local woman hospitalized after neighbor allegedly used laboratory chemicals to poison her lawn and home environment." "She's claiming you used university equipment and chemicals to conduct some kind of revenge attack," Dr. Richardson said quietly. "She's provided documentation showing that you've been involved in an escalating dispute over water usage, and she has witnesses who saw you acting suspiciously in your backyard at night." Maya's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the article. Karen had somehow managed to paint herself as the victim of a deranged scientist's chemical warfare. The article quoted neighborhood sources describing Maya as increasingly erratic and obsessed with her garden to an unhealthy degree. "Dr. Richardson, this is insane. I never used any university resources for anything related to my neighbor. And I certainly never used anything that could cause chemical burns. Maya, I want to believe you, but we've got a problem." He led her to his office and closed the door. "Ms. Whitmore has filed complaints with the EPA, the State Environmental Protection Agency, and the university administration. She's claiming that you've been conducting unauthorized chemical experiments in your home using compounds obtained from our laboratory." "That's completely false. She has photographs of you carrying laboratory equipment to your car. She has witness statements from other faculty members who saw you working late in the lab on several occasions over the past month. And she has documentation of chemical purchases made using university accounts." Maya felt the walls closing in around her. Karen had been planning this for longer than Maya had realized. The woman had been conducting surveillance, documenting Maya's movements, and building a case that would destroy her career. "The chemical purchases can be easily explained," Maya said desperately. "I can show you my research logs, my project documentation. Everything I've purchased has been for legitimate research purposes." "I'm sure it has, but Maya, you need to understand the situation we are in. Whether or not you actually did anything wrong, the perception is that a university faculty member used her position and access to conduct a chemical attack on a civilian. The media is already running with this story." Dr. Richardson pulled up another article on his computer. This one was from the regional news station, with the headline, "Mad Scientist or Neighborhood Dispute Gone Wrong." The piece included an interview with Karen, who appeared to be speaking from a hospital bed, her face partially bandaged. I just can't believe that someone who's supposed to be educating our children could be so vindictive, Karen was saying. Her voice weak and shaky. I tried to be reasonable with her about our water dispute, but she became increasingly hostile and threatening. I never imagined she would resort to chemical weapons. Maya watched in horror as Karen described their conflict as a minor disagreement over garden watering that had escalated when Maya became obsessed with revenge. According to Karen's version of events, Maya had been conducting mysterious experiments in her backyard and making veiled threats about her scientific knowledge. The worst part is that I don't know what she exposed me to, Karen continued, touching her bandaged face. The doctors say it could have long-term effects on my respiratory system and skin. I just hope other parents in our neighborhood realize. What kind of person is teaching their children? This is character assassination, Maya breathed. She's completely fabricated this entire narrative. Maya, I've known you for 5 years. I don't believe for a second that you would intentionally harm anyone. But the university's hands are tied here. We are getting calls from parents, from the Board of Regents, from the State Education Department. Until this gets resolved, you're suspended pending a full investigation. Maya felt her world collapsing around her. In less than 24 hours, Karen had managed to destroy her career, her reputation, and her future. The woman hadn't just escalated their conflict, she'd gone nuclear. How long will the investigation take? Honestly, months. Maybe longer if criminal charges are filed. Maya, you need to get a lawyer. A good one. Maya drove home in a daze, her mind reeling from the sudden reversal of fortune. She'd thought she was playing chess while Karen was playing checkers. Instead, Karen had been playing a completely different game, one where the stakes weren't just property disputes or hurt pride, but Maya's entire life. As she pulled into her driveway, Maya noticed a news van parked across the street. A reporter was standing in front of Karen's house, gesturing toward the dead grass that spelled out Maya's overside message while speaking into a camera. Maya parked in her garage and entered through the back door, hoping to avoid the media circus. But as she walked through her kitchen, she noticed something that made her freeze. Her back door was slightly ajar. Maya was absolutely certain she had locked it when she left for the university that morning. She always checked twice, a habit ingrained from living alone. Heart pounding, she grabbed a kitchen knife and slowly pushed the door open. Her backyard looked like a crime scene. Every single one of her roses had been cut down to stumps. 3 years of careful cultivation, dozens of prize-winning varieties, hundreds of hours of work, all destroyed. The stems had been cut with precision, each plant severed just above the root line. Her other flowers had been uprooted entirely, leaving gaping holes in the rich soil she'd spent years amending and perfecting, but the destruction went beyond mere vandalism. Someone had poured what looked like motor oil over her vegetable garden, saturating the soil with toxic sludge that would make it impossible to grow anything for years. Her gardening tools had been arranged in a neat pile and spray-painted fluorescent orange, the same color used by utility companies to mark dangerous areas. In the center of the devastation, stuck into the ground like a flag, was a sign that read, chemical contamination, do not enter. Maya sank to her knees among the ruins of her garden, the knife falling from her numb fingers. Karen hadn't just destroyed Maya's plants, she'd made it look like Maya had contaminated her own property with dangerous chemicals. The orange paint, the contamination signs, the systematic destruction, it was all designed to support Karen's narrative that Maya was a reckless scientist who posed a danger to the community. Maya's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This is what happens when you mess with the wrong person. You should have just shared your water like a good neighbor. Now everyone knows what you really are. This is only the beginning. Maya stared at the message, feeling something fundamental shift inside her chest. The patient, methodical person she'd always been was disappearing, replaced by something harder and infinitely more dangerous. Karen wanted to play a game of mutually assured destruction. Fine. But Karen had made one critical error in her calculations. She'd assumed that Maya had been playing at full strength all along. Maya stood up slowly, surveying the wreckage of everything she'd built and nurtured. Karen had taken her career, her reputation, and now her garden. The woman had systematically destroyed every aspect of Maya's life that brought her joy or meaning, but Karen had forgotten something important about biochemists. Maya's compound was ready by 3 a.m. Tuesday morning, a crystalline powder so potent that a single grain could produce effects lasting up to 6 hours. She'd spent 12 hours perfecting the formula, a topical agent that would react with the oils in human skin to produce a distinctive and unmistakable odor. Not just any odor, but the precise chemical signature of rotting fish mixed with sulfur compounds, calibrated to activate and intensify with body heat and stress. Karen would smell like a walking sewage treatment plant, and the more agitated she became, the worse it would get. Maya had identified her delivery method during her research into Karen's daily routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Karen attended a hot yoga class at Serenity Studio, an upscale wellness center frequented by the neighborhood's social elite. Karen never missed a class. It was part of her carefully curated image as a health-conscious professional woman. The locker room at Serenity Studio would be the perfect testing ground for Maya's creation. Maya arrived at the studio at 5:30 a.m., knowing that Karen's class didn't start until 6:15. The early morning cleaning crew was just finishing up, and Maya blended in perfectly with the other early risers preparing for dawn yoga sessions. She made her way to the women's locker room and quickly located Karen's usual spot, locker 47, which Karen rented permanently and had decorated with monogrammed labels. Maya's application method was elegantly simple. She dusted a microscopic amount of her compound onto Karen's yoga mat, towel, and water bottle. The powder was invisible and would remain inert until it came into contact with skin oils and elevated body temperature, exactly the conditions produced by an hour of hot yoga. Maya was gone by 5:45, her mission accomplished with the precision of a surgical strike. At 7:30 a.m., Maya's phone exploded with notifications. The first was a video posted to the Serenity Studio community Facebook page. The caption read, "Has anyone else noticed a weird smell in the locker room this morning? It's really bad." The video showed the aftermath of what appeared to be a mass evacuation. Women were streaming out of the building, covering their noses and mouths, while staff members sprayed air freshener and opened windows. In the background, Maya could hear someone retching. The second notification was a local news alert. Hazmat team called to popular yoga studio after chemical smell hospitalizes 2. Maya clicked through to the full article, her heart pounding. According to the report, several women had been overcome by a mysterious chemical odor during a morning yoga class. 2 people had been taken to the hospital for respiratory issues, and the fire department's hazmat team had been called to investigate a possible gas leak or chemical spill. Maya scrolled down to the comments section and found what she was looking for. Karen had posted a lengthy response identifying herself as one of the affected victims. "I was in that class and the smell was absolutely horrific. It started about 20 minutes into the session and just got worse and worse. I've been dealing with chemical harassment from a neighbor who works at the university, and now I'm wondering if this is connected." The smell seemed to follow certain people around, almost like it was coming from their skin or clothes. "I've contacted the police about this potential connection to the ongoing investigation into my neighbor's chemical attacks." Maya felt ice form in her stomach. Karen was connecting the dots faster than Maya had anticipated, and worse, she was doing it in a public forum where it would create a permanent record of her accusations. But the third notification made Maya's blood run cold entirely. It was a text from an unknown number. "Nice try with the yoga studio. Too bad you forgot about security cameras. Check your email." Maya's hands shook as she opened her email. The message was from Karen's personal account, and it contained a single video attachment labeled "Evidence." The video was security footage from Serenity Studio, clearly showing Maya entering the building at 5:30 a.m. and heading directly toward the locker room. The timestamp was clearly visible, and the camera angle captured Maya's face with perfect clarity. Maya's phone rang immediately. Dr. Richardson's name appeared on the screen. "Maya, where are you right now?" "I'm at home." "Why?" "The police are on their way to your house with a search warrant. There's been another incident, this time at a public facility, and security footage has placed you at the scene." Maya sank into a chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. "Dr. Richardson, I can explain." "Maya, don't say another word. Not to me, not to the police, not to anyone until you have a lawyer present. Do you understand me?" The line went dead just as Maya heard car doors slamming in her driveway. Maya looked out her front window to see 3 police cars and what appeared to be a hazmat response vehicle. Officers in protective gear were setting up a perimeter around her house while others prepared to approach her front door. Her phone buzzed with another text from Karen. "This is your last chance to end this quietly. Meet me at Riverside Park in 1 hour. Come alone, or the police get a very interesting video of you synthesizing compounds in your kitchen last night." Maya's blood turned to ice. Karen had been watching her. The woman had somehow been conducting surveillance on Maya's house and had recorded her preparing the compound she'd used at the yoga studio. The knock on her door came hard and authoritative. "Dr. Chen, this is the police. We have a warrant to search your premises." Maya stared at the door, her mind racing through her options. She could let them in and try to explain, but Karen's video evidence would make any explanation sound like desperate lies. She could refuse to cooperate, but that would only make her look more guilty and wouldn't stop the inevitable. Or she could meet Karen at the park and try to end this nightmare before it destroyed what little remained of her life. Maya made her choice. She slipped out her back door while the police were still setting up their equipment in the front yard. The drainage easement that had become her route for nighttime reconnaissance now served as her escape path. She made her way through the narrow strip of city land, keeping low and moving quickly toward the street that would take her to Riverside Park. Maya arrived at the park 15 minutes early and chose a bench near the playground where she could see anyone approaching. The morning was unusually quiet, with only a few joggers and dog walkers taking advantage of the cool air before the day's heat set in. Karen arrived exactly on time, but she wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man Maya didn't recognize, tall, professionally dressed, carrying a briefcase that screamed "lawyer" from 50 yards away. Behind them, at a discreet distance, were two other figures that Maya realized with growing horror were probably private investigators or security personnel. Karen had turned their meeting into an ambush. "Hello, Maya," Karen said pleasantly as she approached the bench. "I'd like you to meet my attorney, Robert Chen. No relation, I assume. And these gentlemen behind us are documenting this conversation for legal purposes." Maya stood slowly, her hands clenched into fists. "What do you want, Karen?" "I want this to end," Karen replied, her voice taking on the reasonable tone she'd perfected for dealing with authority figures. "This escalating conflict has gotten completely out of hand, and innocent people are getting hurt." "Innocent people?" Maya's voice cracked with disbelief. "You destroyed my garden. You're trying to destroy my career, and you've been stealing from me for months." "I think you're confused about who the victim is here," Karen's lawyer interjected smoothly. "My client has been subjected to repeated chemical attacks, property damage, and harassment. She's been hospitalized twice due to your actions." Maya stared at Karen, finally understanding the full scope of what she was dealing with. The woman hadn't just been reactive in their conflict, she'd been orchestrating it from the beginning. The water theft, the escalating complaints, the false documentation, even her own hospitalizations, it had all been designed to build a case that would give Karen complete control over the situation. "What you're looking at," Karen continued, "is evidence of criminal activity that could put you in prison for years." She nodded to a lawyer, who opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Chemical assault, reckless endangerment, terrorism charges related to the yoga studio incident, theft of university resources, environmental crimes, the list goes on." Maya's legs felt weak. "What do you want?" Karen's smile was triumphant. "I want you to sell me your house at a price I consider fair, which is about 60% of its current market value. I want a written apology admitting to all the chemical attacks and taking full responsibility for the conflict between us. And I want you to leave town permanently." "You're insane." "I'm practical," Karen corrected. "See, Maya, I've done this before. 3 times, actually. There's a pattern to how these neighborly disputes play out when I'm involved. The neighbor gets increasingly frustrated, starts acting erratically, and eventually does something that gives me the legal ammunition. I need to destroy them completely." Maya felt the world tilting around her. "You've been planning this from the beginning." "Planning is a strong word. I prefer to think of it as being prepared for opportunities. You made it easy, though. A single woman with access to chemicals and a tendency toward obsessive behavior. You practically wrote the script yourself." Karen's lawyer pulled out a contract and set it on the picnic table beside them.